we started putting these webinars together just to really bring people together to discuss, in a time of uncertainty, to bring a bit of certainty and light to how do we get through this time together and how do we thrive. So this is Ajua's webinars about Stay Alive and Thrive, and we've been having quite a success with many different panelists through this whole series, just to really have a real deep discussion on how we should do and act within the time of COVID. So today we have a really great guest, Kwaku Fleming. Kwaku we come way back from MIT. He actually got his Sloan degree, and Kwaku has a really, really interesting background as also patent holders. He is a patent holder of a few patents, and also, just recently with the Stanford Seed program. But I'm just going to read a bit about his background as a design consultant and really segue into what we're presenting. So Kwaku is a design consultant, collaborates with companies and inventors to develop new products and innovations to existing products. Since 1992, he has served in the consumer goods, telecommunications, and manufacturing, developing products that range from wireless telephones to designer luggage. Fleming earned electrical engineering and mechanical engineering and product design from Stanford University. He's worked with companies such as Walt Disney, Imagineering, Embark, JetBlue, Alcoa, and the United States Patent and Trademark Office. And obviously, I don't see it listed here, but we met at MIT together, and we were actually a bit of history about our relationship. We're actually taking entrepreneurship around the globe within the Sloan program, and Kwaku led that mission with us. We went all the way to the Middle East and the different areas, and Kwaku led that up and really designed that whole program. So without further ado, I would introduce Kwaku and for him to start his webinar with us today. Looking forward to it, Kwaku.
Thank you so much, Kenfield. I have to say that, first of all, I'm honored that you guys invited me to spend a little time with you. I've kept up with the growth of Ajua from the earliest days, since obviously I was connected with the founder. And I just wanted to congratulate you and your entire team for the continual growth that you're demonstrating, and really for your commitment to African businesses and essentially what I'm calling the African Renaissance. I'm going to share my screen, and let's see how this goes. And let's get us. So this morning, I'm going to be speaking to the Ajua community, which I've come to learn are both the people who are part of Ajua, but also more importantly, its clients, its network, its value chain, professionals and entrepreneurs, and individuals who are coping with and carving out a path of transformation for themselves and for their organizations, a path of pivot. So let me know in the chat, by the way, if you're on this call. I always need to have some connection with the people I'm talking to. So if you could open up your chat, let's get it ready now. I'm going to be asking you from time to time during this call to give me some feedback on the chat. And right now, I'd love it if you could just share who you are and share where you're located and maybe what you do. And that will help me in some ways to steer my talk in your direction. Over the next 45 minutes, I'm going to share my favorite tools for addressing disruption head on. There'll be tools for innovation, tools for designing solutions, tools for preparing a pivot. And my goal and my hope is that when it's all completed, that you will at least feel a little more confident as you confront disruption, confident in your design, or confident in your capacity to change course and pivot innovatively. So I don't see anything in the chat yet. So I need to know who you are. So go ahead and come and get into the chat. At this time, I'm going to give just a little more introduction to myself. What's interesting to some is that I became Kwaku when I was 40. And it was on a Wednesday. And if you're familiar with that, Kwaku means I'm born on Wednesday. So I'm both fully American, in as much as my my forefather, Tobias Hill, American Revolution, and was really basically a contributor in that sense to paving the way. He was an African. And now I'm sort of coming full circle because I was so proudly and so happily given Ghanaian citizenship last year during the year of return, after having lived in Ghana for about 20 years. In Ghana, I'm an executive business coach, and I partner with entrepreneurs, with leadership teams to scale businesses. For the last 7 years, as Ken Fields mentioned, I've been doing that with Stanford Seed. I'm now doing that same work with MEST, Meltwater. Both Seed and Meltwater are across the global continent. And right now, I'm focusing on developing a new accelerator for e-commerce businesses, particularly those that are focused on bringing capacity to Africa's huge informal merchant sector. So anyway, that's the work that I'm doing right now. I mean, in a nutshell, I've studied at schools, I've worked at universities. Okay, I see DJ, POA in the internet. Thanks for letting me know. And Lucy, I see you on the screen. Thanks. I'm right now. I would say that is not really the story of Kwaku. In reality, and if you're like me, you're someone who doesn't really fit in boxes very well. And I learned early in my life that I'm not a box kind of guy. I'm not comfortable with the definitions. And in fact, I tend to, sort of fall outside of boxes. And that's okay. I'm sharing this because one of the things I learned early on was how powerful it is to A, be yourself, and B, to craft and design your experience and the world that you want to live in. And really what we're talking about is going to be around crafting the world you want to live in. So by the way, I need some more feedback. If you're on this call, let me know what your background is. If I were to put it in a nutshell, the real work that I do is around nurturing dreams. If I see if I hear about an idea, I will stroke it, I will nurture it, I will, bring it, I will conjure it up and see what I can do to make it a reality. And for me, I just feel like it'd be a great world if we were able to work in the domain which is our passion. And in that sense, I always challenge the people that I work with, the people that I coach, to really imagine, what would you do if you had all the choice in the world, and if you were going to create a career for yourself and you can get paid for it? What would you do? You'd probably go to your passion, you'd probably go to your strengths, and I hope and I trust that you would go to the greatest service that you can provide everyone. I'm going to, on the screen, you see that I'm asking you, what job title would you have? So if you didn't get to say hey on the chat earlier, then let me know, what would be the job title that you would own if you were in your greatest passion, in the space of your greatest passion? And then I'll tell you in a moment why I'm going this direction. So I'm going to take just 20 seconds. you're in the call, think about it and give me a sense of what you would be doing if you're. Sometimes we tend to hide our gifts and we don't operate in the space, but I'm just sharing that there's quite a power in doing that. And part of why I'm starting in this space of who am I and what do I storyteller, I see that. Who am I and what do I do is important, because when we're dealing with disruption, one of the first things we know we're going to have to do is take stock of who we are, how we are, how we're managing, how we're feeling, how we're showing up. And so going into this space of what am I about, what matters most to me, what is my state of mind that comes up. So disruptions come in many forms. You can have disruptions, your typical competitive disruption. Your competitor comes in and creates a new gizmo that, God, that makes you all have to sort of dig deep and figure out how we're going to come against that competitive challenge. Even before COVID, industries were being challenged, right? They were being disrupted. A great example is the banking industry. When mobile money hit, if I'm now speaking from the West Africa perspective, because I know you guys have been experiencing mobile money for much longer in East Africa. When mobile money hits and these companies are growing, they have a huge subscribe base, and now they start to look at it like a bank. The banks have been disrupted, and they really need to reorganize, refocus, and pivot their activities to meet that. And there's also that is also a technological challenge. But obviously, we've all been challenged by this huge global pandemic, right? As a result, I mean, it's caused us to change the way we do things. It's created new norms. It's caused us in some of our operations and businesses to have to rethink, figure it out again. We see that some of our clients are not around. We see that some of our employees or our partners are not around for us. It's harder. We have to work harder to be engaged in the work that we were involved in before. We have to learn new practices. We have to deal with this imposed, what was essentially like an imposed pause button. I mean, that's what it's like. This huge global pause button has been hit. So, that's the disruption that we're all as a world, we can all relate to. But the things I'll be sharing are not just related to this current crisis, but really to any kinds of disruptions that come up. So I have to say that the disruption that we're facing in COVID and this global pause button that we experience has had its really tough sides, but it's also had its really positive sides for me. I mean, maybe some of you have had some things that you can call and say, because of what's happened, this period has really somehow become a benefit for me. In my case, I found that I have more quiet time. I spend more quality time with the people that I live with. I discovered some hobbies. I've tried some new things, and then of course I've been able to look at. We've all had to look at life in the world differently, but I've been able to look at life in the world differently and see the opportunities that exist in it. So when we're faced with disruption, I'm going to recommend that we all find our version of a pause button, and for me, that pause button has come to represent first preparing yourself and your team for change, assessing the new landscape, uncovering new ideas, selecting a new course or new direction, and then executing So I'm saying push that pause button, right? So I'm going to share a couple of the tools that I think are really, that I found helpful as I prepare myself and prepare my team for change. So for me to say that when, and in general, it's actually a general human condition, when disruption comes, we immediately have some reflective responses, some feelings of concern or worry. In the case of this pandemic and the way it's affected some of our businesses, some of our families and our operations, it's quite understandable you might have experienced some anxiety, some fear, some concern. The first tool that I just want to speak to briefly is just this idea of mindfulness. Stepping outside of the feelings, stepping outside of the thoughts, and observing them. Once you can observe them, then you realize the thoughts are not you. The concerns and the fears and the anxiety is not you. It's something that you're experiencing. It's something you're observing. And mindfulness, use whatever form of mindfulness it is. You might pray, you might, do tapping, you might meditate, whatever it is, just have something that helps you center, find your center, be calm, and get into the space where you can be effective as you think and plan and work your way through an innovative pivot. So you're really looking for mindset. And the mindset for change is what you're looking for. And so for me, as I think about what this really represents, I would say it's basically stopping, taking a breath, observing what's going on before you now set forward, separating your minds and your thoughts from the anxiety or whatever concerns you're seeing, and replacing those with powerful thoughts, powerful mindsets. Here's the mindset that I think is the right one for rate of change. Being confident in yourself, confident in your process. And it's part of why I'll be sharing some tools, which are essentially frameworks. They provide process, and they've been tried and tested and repeatable. So they're a great process that you can start with practice. You then become quite confident in those processes. Recognizing that every problem is actually filled with some wonderful opportunities and open to inspiration. And the inspiration can come from anywhere. The inspiration can come from anywhere, but if you can count on the inspiration from a team that you're working with, then you also want to make sure you're doing that. So I'm going to probably speed ahead because I see I've got a lot of points and I may not get to all of them. But when I talk about drawing from your powerful team, I would just want to say that there's such a thing as post-heroic leadership. And right now I'm speaking to founders and managers who are working with a team of people. If you find that what you often find, what I often find when I work with companies, is that, particularly startups, is that there's a leader who's visionary, who knows everything about the company. They also have built it from scratch, and so they've made some key decisions. They are the hero of this company. And now that the company has grown a bit, they're operating, they have a team, they realize, oh, they're still the hero. They're the one doing everything. The team is waiting for decisions from the leader. That's heroic leadership. Post-heroic leadership says, as leaders, you don't have to be the hero. You don't have to know everything. You don't have to solve all the problems, and you don't have to have all the answers. So as a part of your toolkit, think about this: be the post-heroic leader. Instead of saying that it's your responsibility to determine, make all the decisions and keep your company afloat, it's on you. Instead of that, post-heroic leader. Everyone in your organization can be a leader and is a leader. Your job is to build a strong team in which they can share in your responsibility. So the post-heroic leader's job, and so these are the tools. The job of the leader: engage your team, get them all. Share your vision, communicate your intent. Stop communicating just instructions, but communicate your intent. And then mentor your team to be leaders. And I think this is recorded. We are being recorded. I'm going to go very quickly through a tool you can use for mentoring your team to be great leaders. So imagine your reportee comes to you and says, "Boss, I've got this big problem. I need to know which direction I should go." Okay, you have two choices. You can tell this person what direction to go, or you can mentor your team member, and that's what this framework is going to be useful for. The framework is called GROW, right? Instead of giving the answer, say, what is your goal? And what does success look like? Get the answer. I'm going to speed through this because of time. Then, next question. What is the current situation? What are you dealing with right now? Just lay it out. And what steps have you taken so far? Great. Third, of all the options that are possible, of all the different alternatives and directions you could go, what are they? What can you do? What might you do? And the fourth is, what's the way forward? Okay, which way of all of these will you choose? Now, you notice I didn't say, I think you should go this way. No, I didn't answer the question. Rather, leaders and leaders come to great answers. And there's a lot of content around this. You can look up post-heroic leader online. I'll be happy to share some resources in that, as well, the GROW methodology. But really, get your team in the game of pivot. A team of leaders all focused in the same direction is powerful for your pivot. Okay, so enough about preparing yourself and your team. The next step is assessing the new landscape. And I'm going to share a few tools on assessing the new landscape. The first one, and this is okay, disruption has happened. So now the first thing you and your team want to do is understand what's going on, what's the new situation, and what's changed. And when you do this, you're going to ask about what's changed inside your organization and your internal operations, and also in the ecosystem, with your clients, with your suppliers, with your competitors. Okay, so the first tool in this space that I want to share with you is just the business model canvas. Now, I'm going to, because of time, not going to spend a lot of time on the business model canvas, other than to say what it is and then how you might use it to assess your landscape. There's so many resources online about business model canvas. There's some primers, some tutors. You'll see how it's used. But essentially, the business model canvas is 13 blocks for describing your enterprise, all the key components of the enterprise that go into having a powerful business model. So this business model canvas is, okay, I said 13 boxes. You see 13 boxes there. On the conventional business model canvas, you'll see 9 boxes, and we've added a few extra boxes. But essentially, you can step through and ask those same questions. What's changed? What's the new situation for your customers, for your value proposition or the offering? for the channels and the customer relationship that how you reach your customer. What's changed about the resources you have available and about the activities, your key activities that you're able to do and the partners. So it's using this as the guide for thinking through what's going on in your business. So that's the business model canvas. And that's all I want to say about it. You can find so much information about it online. But another tool, and this sort of draws from the business model canvas, but it's just deconstructing your business model. And for this activity, this will help you to sort of get a clear picture of what's going on, and I'm going to speed through it. Deconstructing your business model is essentially, first you're going to be listing the key activities, and you can start with the place where the main transaction happens with your customers, and just diagram it. And then you're going to diagram other key activities that you do. You can see on the screen examples of key activities that you do in your operation or in your business. Then you want to list some of the key resources of any kind. And you see on the screen some examples of resources. But you basically list your various key resources, and you're basically building out a diagram of your operation deconstructed. Then you can do something like highlight the activities that you perform really well, like everyone compliments you on what you do, and the business community has often asked you to share your processes. Highlight the steps that your customers really find most valuable, the things they talk to you most about, where they have the greatest energy around what you do. And then highlight the big changes that are caused by disruption. Okay, so you can see very quickly you get this deconstructed view of what's going on and what you used to do, the resources you used to have, and what you're actively working with today. You can, of course, broaden this view to include your clients and your suppliers and your key customers and your key partners. And so in deconstruction, you'll be creating this kind of a map and model. And then, as I said, you'll look into your customers and clients. So one of the clients that I work with, is actually I'm on their board, is Basics International, which is an educational NGO based in Ghana. In fact, in Ghana, one of Accra's poorest neighborhoods. And so I'm going to share very quickly a version of their deconstructed business model, and some of the areas that they thought that they really performed quite well. Now, essentially, Basics is an after-school program. I mean, some of what they do is find vulnerable kids that are not in schools, they place them into schools, and then to make these develop the course of their young lives. They also provide this huge after-school program where the students really have an enjoyable event. They have a feeding program, tutorial. They curate fun activities and classes. So the students get really engaged in after-school programs. They highlighted some of the steps that the children and the schools that they partner with. And then they highlight the big changes caused by disruption. Okay, well, the schools closed, and the after-school programs initially were required to close. And then even when Basics was able to, under special circumstances, open up, there was still the social distancing and some challenges they had in the operation. So you can imagine, so here is an example of business model deconstruction for a educational NGO. Now we're going to come back to this later as we think about innovation. But the other way, another way of and responsibility of at this point of assessing what's going on is looking at your clients and understanding your clients. And for us, there are so many ways to understand what's going on with the clients now. What's the new landscape for the clients? But the tool of my favorite is empathy interviews. And there's empathy interviews are important because they help you in designing solutions that really get to the heart and the core of what your target customer really values and needs. Sometimes because of empathy interviews, you get deeper understanding about what they really want and need. You're not looking at the express needs, but you're looking deep down, like the bottom of an iceberg, at the latent needs. So, wow, the timing is not going to allow me to go into a lot of detail. So I'm going to speed forward and just share a useful tool in doing empathy interviews. And it's really about observation. When you go to your customer, these are the things you want to focus on. What are the activities that they're doing and how have they changed? What's the environment looking like? What are the interactions and the objects? What are they using? What objects are missing? What's happening between people? Who are the users? What are their pains? And what are their challenges? And the last thing I'm going to talk about on empathy interviews is, this is important. When you're going to an empathy interview, you want to understand the client's deeper sides. You want to understand their emotional sides. You essentially want to, it's not a conversation, a normal conversation. It's one where you're listening and you're not feeding answers and you're not selling your product. You're listening to hear what's happening. Contact your clients, reach out to your clients and understand what's going on new with them. And rules for empathy interviews: one question at a time, short questions, listen more than talk, and don't ask closed questions or binary questions. One of my favorite rules: don't talk in the general, and don't use usually. Typically, how do you do this? Ask about the extremes. You get much better stories. What's the worst experience you had with this situation is much better than what's your typical experience. If they respond and say things like, I think this, or I believe this, or I prefer something, always ask why. Why is your most powerful question on the empathy interview? And then always use a recorder. Don't forget to collect your responses. Okay, I am going to dash through a couple of my favorite tools for innovation. It'll be a dash. I will provide some resources for you afterwards that you can go into deeper study and use of these. The first one is brain-centered design. When customers give you money in exchange for something that they're buying from you, they're essentially paying for two things. There are only two. There's two big buckets of things. The first big bucket is solve their problem. If you solve their problem, they're willing to pay. But the surprising second essential is make them feel good and experience emotions that they're looking to experience. So sometimes we're designing a solution that we want to offer, a new idea, a new product or service, and we focus just on solving the problem. The secret is, between these two, the way our brains, the research on the brain has essentially found that when we make decisions, it's actually our emotional brain that it has a stronger pull in making decisions for us. And then the rational brain comes behind it and rationalizes the decision and makes sense of the decision for our rational mind. So whenever we're designing solution, we want to make sure we have not forgotten to focus on the emotional need or the emotional feeling, the experience that we're trying to deliver to our customer. That's brain-centered design. Important, really important tool. That's it. The another tool is this, of course, design thinking. I'm going to ask you to Google design thinking. There's so many references online, but using design thinking is a powerful tool. But I'm going to skip past it just in the interest of time and go to the one we started, which is we build a deconstructed business model. So let's pull back out that deconstructed business model, and we've realized that we've deconstructed our business model, and we're going to start to ask some key questions about what's happening. So essentially, we're stepping back from our normal point of exchange, and we're saying, can we find new value streams and new points and new exchange points in the process? Can we reposition our value proposition? Can we reposition a point of transaction? Can we find new points of engagement and new partners? So very quickly, in the case of Basics International, they had, one of the activities they had was silk screening. So they would make small lots of t-shirts for the events they do, and the students that are in the program would learn how to do that skill. They also had some sewing machines, and students were learning how to sew. Well, some of the more advanced students and those who had been in the program and since graduated, they found a new source, a point of exchange. And basically, they started to offer, and really got a huge project, a huge contract to do silk screening of masks. That is the COVID PPE. And also the sewing machines are now, and those who were sewing are now actively working to create thousands and thousands and thousands of PPE masks. They have one of their resources was a large database, and they've been able to since partner and find new points of new partners and new points of offering by partnering with other NGOs like United Way, and there's a food truck, and they're delivering, instead of their feeding program, now they're delivering in the community through these new partnerships. They are also able to look at how they're strong with placements of their students into schools. And so they've been able, through this disruption, to refocus. Wow, why don't we spend more time and more effort in connecting with the best schools, so that these students, though they're from a poor background, will be in schools, and then we'll support these schools with their own after-school programs. So when the students get back to school, Basics will have been able to place their incoming newer students into schools that will have more powerful after-school programs, and that will relieve Basics of some of its stress and strain of delivering services to these students. But then it also opens them up to look at another pivot, which for them is development of a out of the city, away from the urban environment camp, which they're calling Camp Promise. So this is just an example of how they had used this deconstruction to take a new look at their organization and create paths for pivot. And I think the final one I will quickly share, it's just, maybe I'll share one example of an ideation template. So ideation templates are a structured and systematic approach to idea generation. So we talked, I alluded to design thinking, which looks at the customer. It's customer-centered, and it provides a repeatable process that you can use to design products that really speak to the customer. Well, there's also other approaches to ideation, coming up with new ideas. And so these templates can help you. They're basically looking at patterns that have worked for other products and reproducing them for you. So here's an example. Subtraction. Take a product you're offering, remove one essential element and then or component and see what you get. Examples are like the pitch black restaurant. Take a restaurant, remove all the light, and what do you get, right? It's an example. Just another example, the shoes. Remove the shoelaces, then what do you get? Oh, this trendy kind of shoe that you can slip on, right? Look at this one. Take a shovel, cut a hole in it, remove that essential component. Now what do you have? You have the extra shovel. Okay. So I think that there's just an example of a ideation template called Subtraction, where you write down the product's internal components, you talk about what each of those functions are, and you remove one of those functions or one of those components. And just imagine what's the resulting product and what might it be useful for? How might a customer then find value in it? So there's an example of a wonderful ideation template, and there are probably several. I would share maybe 3 or 4, but in the end, looking at the time, I know we're constrained by the time of this webinar. I'm going to hit my pause and just ask for us to move to the next step, which would really be, at least for what I've shared, let's move to some questions and answers, or maybe some feedback, so that we'll be able to get to those before we close. So let's see, I'm not able to hear anything, so let's see. I'm really looking for feedback about how much time we may have. If you can put it in the chat, I don't seem to be hearing. The organizers at the moment.
Hello, Kweku, we do have at least 7 more minutes.
Okay.
Kweku, can you hear me? 7 more minutes. Yeah.
Okay. So given that, I am going to share very quickly some other ideation templates that are useful. Look at this one, task unification, right? So task unification is essentially combining multiple functions into the same. Right. My favorite one is this adorable onesie that also mops the floor at the bottom. Okay, so another template is multiplication template, where you're basically taking your product and multiplying it and essentially creating a new product out of it. And then another template is dependency swapping. So it's sort of changing the relationship between attributes in your own product. And that's something you can also do with your deconstruction, right? But basically change how different components work together and then offer that as its own new product. Okay. Okay, so the last 2 parts would have been team vetting templates, and very quickly I would share, when you have a brainstorming session and you come out with hundreds of ideas, I say capture all those ideas and as a group vet those ideas. And one of the tools I use for that is this team vetting template, where we give everybody these colored numbered papers, and each person on the team gets to vote. And we take a spreadsheet that has all the new ideas we came up with listed under the dream or the idea. We make clarifications as we get to each one, but very quickly spending a minute on each of the ideas. If you have hundreds of ideas and 20 people, it's hard to figure out, well, where's the energy? What are the favorite ideas? This template helps you quickly to do that. And so that would be a really useful tool that I can share more of that through communications afterwards. And then when you do hit upon your top 10 or 20 ideas, then making idea dashboards is a good way for a team to then be able to sort of sort through the ideas and understand what's really behind the ideas, more the detail, so that they can make a good decision about a better decision about these many ideas, some of that which were not their own ideas. And then finally, the execute and evaluate stage is where you would want to take the pivot that you've decided on and actually implement it. And I think, a great tool for doing this is the MVP, or really the lean startup methodology. I won't spend time on it now, but there's a lot of research, a lot of resources available with that as well. Lean Startup Machine is the source. And you'll find a lot of tutorials and resources that'll help you do that. But essentially, it's building your first offering or product as a minimum viable product and getting it out quickly into the marketplace in a way where you don't spend a lot of money, you don't spend a lot of time, but you have enough to get feedback from these first trial users so that they will give you feedback that you can then use to improve as you make your next iteration and offer it to a broader client base. So that's the lean startup and the approach and the minimal viable product. And the last tool for the pivot is to be ready with success metrics from the beginning. So when you're ready to put your new product or try your new pivot, before you put it out there, be clear, how do I know if this is going to be metrics in advance? And then when you do the test, if you meet those metrics, you've passed. If you don't, you failed. And cut your losses. Failure is great. You learn a lot from it. You fail forward by moving on to your next great idea. So when you make these MVPs, they're really great for all of these things on the screen, uncovering, basically getting that feedback that you need to come back with a better insight and a better follow-up product. But there's another reason why this is a great approach, and it's because of the Ikea effect, and it's going to be my last tool. Use the Ikea effect. Ikea is a Swedish company that makes ready-to-assemble furniture, and through research, we've learned that when you build something yourself, it's development, and that's the important part. You start to feel like you own it and you love it. So bring your clients on board early. Let them know what you're developing and let them share in the development by giving you feedback, giving you great ideas. And when you do so, you find that you've got a much loyal client, much better marketplace. Okay, so those are the steps that I'm saying. When you're faced with disruption, you need to pivot. Take up your own pause. And I'm going to, I see now the time is up, so I'm going to pull this to an end by just saying, over to you. I think you're on mute. I'm not able to hear the organizer. So until I do, I'm going to encourage everyone to go to menti.com and use the code 792781 and give us some feedback.
Thanks, Kweku. I really appreciate it. This was very, very, very insightful. And wish we had a longer time frame for this, because I think some of the things that you shared are very, very important at this time for us to think through. Because a lot of businesses are having to redesign their products and offering, right? Because the customer behavior is changing. And looking at how to really get back and insert yourself into the customer's language or the customer's way of doing things is quite important. And I just have a question before we let you go is, with your models, is this applicable to any size business, especially when you look at, startups are a bit more nimble, and larger businesses, obviously, they're less nimble. How would you apply this to a larger business setting, say, for instance, a bank versus a startup, especially when they're trying to kind of reinvent themselves, trying to really understand how the behaviors of the customers changing? What are your tools to address different types of or sizes of businesses?
So essentially, the tools stay the same, but how they're used start to change. And so what I would say is you could take a look at any of these tools. And even if you're an enterprise, within the enterprise, there's a group or a team of people who will be addressing the pivot or addressing innovation and coming and solving a solution, solving a problem. You can use these same tools, and then you use them in a way that sort of reflects the scope of the challenge, the size of the operation that you're working in, and the agility of the organization that you're working within.
Then a follow-up question to that is, obviously, because of the current pandemic, the distance between you and your customer has actually changed, right? So you've increased that proximity. So a lot of these tools, and excuse me for my ignorance in some sense, right? When you think of design thinking, you think of the intimacy that you have with your customer. So looking at the framework that you've offered, right? How do you use the same framework, but taking into account that you're not in the presence of your customer, or your customer is not in the presence of your organization to actually execute on some of these items?
Yeah. Well, I think one of the most important things we can do at this time is stay connected with our client, even though we may not be able to be with them face to face. And fortunately, of course, we're all learning and operating in these new remote technologies, and many of us are finding that, wow, these conference calls can be really efficient, and still I can feel as if I'm face to face. So I think we just have to take advantage of the resources available to us, the technology available to us, and in that way, in some ways, you're actually getting closer, because you may be able to spend even more time with your client. So the other thing is to be innovative. You can't be in the office with them, but you still want to get the view of the customer, or you still want to, or maybe you want to experience, well, what's their environment like now? Well, have them carry that laptop around and let them show you, let them walk you through and narrate what's going on. It's actually a valuable observation tool to let them show you, because it'll be interesting. The things that they choose as significant conveys a lot of information back to you, so that you're getting more insights. So I say just be creative, use the technology that's available to us, and challenge yourself to be closer than you've even been before.
It's quite interesting.
the pandemic.
I think it's like one of the resources of the approaches that you use to design is the subtraction model, right? So I think we can also look at it as we're subtracting that, that intimacy in some sense, right? And and exploring what happens after you subtract that intimacy and really designing around that. So it could be very interesting.
That's right. And I would say it's subtracting the proximity, but how
Proximity.
you'll have the intimacy, right? And so that's the challenge. And what we're finding is that we just have to be creative in building the intimacy despite our distance.
Got it.
Be done.
Got it. So thank you, Kweku. We'll give you some space to say your closing remarks, and then we'll close out. Thanks everyone for joining us today with Kweku Fleming, who's a design consultant from the SEED program background from MIT, Stanford, and really have transformed businesses across the continent through the SEED program and now with MEST. So as he left his contact details as well, please feel free to contact Kweku directly. I've sat through some of his sessions, and obviously it was more in person, and I have to say they're very riveting sessions that would actually make you think about how your business is structured, and also make you think of how you actually lead the pack within your industry and your competition. So I'll leave it up to you to your closing remarks, Kweku, and then we'll close out.
Well, thanks, Ken Phil, and it's really been a pleasure to share with you guys. I'm really glad you've been patient with me as I was developing this. I would just close by acknowledging the times, and it is a time of great disruption, but it's also a time of great opportunity. And at this point in this process, we're several months in, and we've sort of gotten our bearings, and we're starting now to pivot and move in a powerful direction. I think we've learned some important things. We've learned that our countries, right, can be more independent, more self-sufficient. And we've learned some of that during this period. And we also learned that where some of the gaps in self-sufficiency are, and they create huge opportunities. We've also seen, I think, that this period is a time for really the reemergence across Africa of successful businesses and, in fact, successful nations. And this period, to me, is sort of our wake-up call, a combination of a wake-up call and a start button for what I think and expect and hope will be a renaissance within Africa. And thanks to leaders who are focused on being confident, finding great ideas, applying them to our situation, and then creating the powerful pivots. And so I would just say tools with confidence, with leaders working together, and a mindset for change, that we can create our cherished future that is the African Renaissance. Okay, and I'll just thank you all for receiving me, and I really look forward to another opportunity to join you.
Thanks, Kweku. Really appreciate it. And thanks everyone for joining Ajua's webinars, Stay Alive and Thrive. Really appreciate having Kweku join us and giving us some insights on how we should be thinking through this time using a design approach, and also really, thinking about disruption, because all of our businesses have been disrupted. And, it's not just competition, but it's the pandemic. So looking how to navigate that. So thanks again for everyone for joining. And thanks again, Kweku, really appreciate it. Thanks for the insights. I took a lot of screenshots while you were talking, so I'll be sharing them with the team. Thanks again. Take care, everyone.
Thanks, Ken Phil.
All right.